Hello people. It has been a while since you've heard my voice in this channel and an even longer time since you've seen my face. I know some of you watching this probably aren't used to looking at this ugly mug, but rest assured, that stinging sensation in your eyes will go away after a few minutes. No, but in all seriousness, I want to start this video off by firstly apologizing for how long it's been since the last episode of the Strength Motion Comic series. When I started releasing episodes for this series, my plan was to always only take short breaks after the end of each part and then resume the normal schedule of 2 episodes a week. But that break was obviously longer than it was supposed to be. Mainly that happened because I got really busy in my personal life. I graduated from university, I started a new full-time job, but mostly it's because I finally broke down and bought myself a Switch. At the end of this video, I'm going to give a bittersweet update on Strength Part 2. So if you're interested in hearing that, which I know I am, then make sure you stay tuned until the end of this video. However, now it's time to get into the reason why I decided to make this video in the first place, which I am very excited about. I am going to be summarizing all of Strength Part 1. I had the idea for this video for a while now, it just took me a bit longer than I wanted to finally get around to doing it. This video is not only for my own amusement, but it's also for any of you guys who are watching the Strength Motion Comic series and maybe missed an episode, or watched the entire thing and are just looking for a recap, or haven't seen any episodes of the series because the episodes are too long and you just hate the sound of my voice. It's fine, I get it. But without further ado, I have my copy of Strength, which is available for purchase on Amazon and strengthbook.ca. I have my reading glasses, which aren't prescription, but I wear to make myself look smarter, and we're all ses. Okay, let's begin. In the prologue of our story, which takes place 6 months before the events of the novel, we're introduced to our protagonist, Josh Davis, and his father, Nathan. The two were leaving a boxing tournament that Josh just finished competing in and are now driving back to their home on Prince Edward Island in the middle of a raging winter storm. On top of that, Josh's father decided to take a shortcut through a back road in the woods, which made their already terrible driving conditions much worse. It's obvious that Josh is feeling embarrassed about his performance in the tournament. Being such a scrawny kid, he always felt that he was so much weaker than everyone else. His father tries his best to cheer him up and improve his mood, but eventually the two just end up driving in silence. Suddenly, a massive tree falls directly in front of their truck, causing the vehicle to crash right into it. The truck violently flips over the tree and down a shallow bank before eventually coming to a stop next to a frozen lake. With the truck having been flipped onto the driver's side, both Josh and his father are dazed and injured, with his father in particular pinned under the destroyed windshield of the truck, unable to move. Thanks to his father's encouragement, Josh is able to climb out of the destroyed truck, and when he does, he notices that the vehicle has caught on fire. Josh desperately tries to free his trapped father from the burning vehicle, but it's no use. Then, just as Josh turns around to see if there's anything close by that he can use to pry the windshield off his injured father, the truck explodes. The force of the blast sends Josh flying through the air and knocks him unconscious. When he awakens in a hospital bed sometime later, extremely sore and confused, with his crying mother beside him, he finds out that his father is dead. In Chapter 1, Josh wakes up in his bedroom, the feelings of sadness and guilt still fresh in his mind from that night. It's not long before he's in tears, but luckily his dog, Boxer, hears that he's awake and jumps up on Josh's bed to comfort him. Now in a slightly better mood, Josh quickly showers and gets dressed. He's about to leave his room when his eyes catch the picture of him when he was 10 years old and his father at the first ever boxing tournament Josh participated in. While staring at the picture, he can't help but be reminded of how much he misses his late father. Josh, with Boxer following him closely, leaves his room and walks towards the kitchen. As the two walk past Josh's mother's room, Josh peers in to see that his mother is still in bed, clearly exhausted from working her 2 jobs. Josh takes a moment to reflect on how harshly his father's sudden death has affected both he and his mother, before quietly making his way to the kitchen to have breakfast and pack a lunch. Right after Josh opens the fridge, his mother, still in her pajamas, joins him and Boxer in the kitchen. The two of them chat for a few minutes while Josh eats his breakfast, but it's clear that his mother is much more focused on the stack of overdue bills piled nearby. It seems clear to Josh that no matter how much she worked, that stack never got any smaller. Josh finishes his breakfast and unenthusiastically leaves their apartment to go catch the bus. In Chapter 2, Josh's school bus arrives at a stop a few minutes early, forcing Josh to run in order to catch it. Out of breath by the time he finally gets on his bus, Josh makes his way down the aisle to the only available seat, which is unfortunately right behind his bully, Mike Wilson. Josh thinks back to how he first met Mike at his former boxing gym and tried to become friends with him. Although the two were never close, Josh originally felt bad for Mike, considering he was always coming into boxing practice with fresh bruises on his arms and back. However, when Mike was unable to keep his violent temper under control in the ring and kept beating on Josh in practice after the bell had rung, their coach kicked Mike out of the gym. Ever since this happened, Mike blamed Josh for getting kicked out of the boxing gym, and now Mike reminds Josh of how much he hates him by tormenting him at school every single day. And today is no different, as Mike tries tripping Josh as he walks towards the empty bus seat, and then laughs when Josh nearly falls over. Josh calls Mike a dumbass, which Mike doesn't exactly take well because he immediately responds to this by punching Josh in the face. As the students on the bus all cheer for Mike, Josh just places a hand on his already bruising jaw and stares out the window in silence. In Chapter 3, Josh walks into the school lobby where he's greeted by his 4 close friends. His friends clearly want to ask Josh about the fresh bruise on his jaw, but decide to leave it, as they can tell Josh is still upset about what had happened. After going to his first 2 classes of the day, English and gym, Josh meets back up with his friends in the cafeteria during lunch, where Josh admits that Mike punched him in the face on the bus after Josh called him a dumbass. His friends respond by trying to encourage Josh to just ignore Mike from now on, but Josh is doubtful that he'll be able to. Once lunch ends, Josh excitedly heads to his 3rd class of the day, French class. His excitement has nothing to do with his love of studying the French language. The highlight of Josh's day comes when he gets to sit next to one of his classmates, Tessa Walker, one of the kindest and most caring people at the school, who always treated Josh with respect. Josh and Tessa spend most of the class chatting and joking around until the teacher begins assigning pairs of students laptops to use to work on a project. As luck would have it, there aren't enough laptops for all the students, so Josh and Tessa are sent next door to the computer room to work on their project together in private. The two continue to grow closer as they work, and Josh couldn't be any happier about this. That is, until he peers through the open doorway and sees Mike staring at him from inside a neighboring classroom with a triumphant smirk on his face. Not wanting Tessa to notice just how anxious Mike seeing the two of them together was making him, Josh tells Tessa that the two of them should head back to their class since 3rd period is nearly over. In Chapter 4, the school's secretary knocks on the French classroom's door and calls Josh out of class because the principal, Mr. Porter, would like to have a word with him. Trying to hide his fear, Josh follows the secretary to the front office and takes a seat outside the principal's office, waiting to be told to go inside. As he waits, Josh notices an intense-looking man dressed in a black military uniform pull into the parking lot and makes his way towards the front office. The man then barges into Mr. Porter's office, where the two men have a loud and angry argument. The military man eventually storms out of Mr. Porter's office and leaves the school, and Josh is finally invited in to meet with Mr. Porter. Mr. Porter reveals to Josh that Mike and some of the other students on his bus reported that it was Josh who started the fight with Mike that morning, despite that obviously not being the truth. Josh tries to argue his case, but Mr. Porter has his mind made up, and he tells Josh that if he gets into one more fight at school, he'll be suspended and his mother will be notified. Angry and defeated, Josh exits Mr. Porter's office and, instead of going to his 4th period class, decides to walk home. In Chapter 5, Josh enters his apartment after thinking long and hard about how miserable his bullying situation is at school. Josh then spends a rainy evening hanging out inside the apartment with his dog Boxer until his mom finally comes home from work later that night. Exhausted, she talks to Josh for a few minutes before going to bed. When Josh heads to bed a little later, he falls asleep, promising himself that he will do whatever he can to avoid getting into another fight at school, in order to keep his mother from finding out about his troubles. The next morning, Josh wakes up to his back causing him an immense amount of pain. He takes a few prescribed painkillers before making his way out to the kitchen, where he finds his mom making him breakfast. Surprised to see that she's up so early, Josh chats to her for a few minutes before realizing that something is bothering her. His mom reveals that she had called Josh's boxing coach that morning and discovered that Josh had quit boxing months ago without telling her. Josh confesses that he had quit boxing because it reminded him too much of his late father, but didn't tell his mother for fear of disappointing her. His mother hugs him, and just when Josh thinks the matter is resolved, his mother realizes that if Josh wasn't getting his bruises at boxing, including the fresh one on his face that Mike had given him yesterday morning, then he must be getting them at school. Before she's able to get an answer out of Josh, he leaves the apartment to catch the bus. On the bus, Josh is momentarily ecstatic when he sees that Mike isn't there today. But his excitement goes away as soon as he remembers that when he comes home at the end of the day, he's going to have to tell his mother the truth about how he's been getting into fights at school. In Chapter 6, Josh walks into the school and meets his friends in their usual place in the lobby. After talking to them for a few minutes, they part ways and head to their morning classes, which are relatively uneventful for Josh. He meets back up with his friends at lunch, and the five of them join the rush of students heading off school grounds. Josh and his friends are a bit later getting to a local popular sandwich shop close to their school, and are forced to wait near the back of a long line of students. By the time they finally get their food, they have to eat quickly as they're running late for class. Since Josh and his friends are running late, they decide to take a shortcut back to the school behind a convenience store. But it's here where they run into Mike and his friends. Mike, knowing that Josh can't get into another fight or he'll be suspended, immediately begins yelling insults at Josh as he walks by. At first, Josh is able to ignore these insults, but when Mike begins talking about Josh's dead father, Josh just can't let that go and punches Mike in the face. The two of them fight for a few minutes before Mike easily kicks Josh's ass with his superior size and strength. Mike then thanks Josh for the bruise, as that's all the proof he needs to show Mr. Porter to get Josh suspended for fighting. Mike and his friends walk away, leaving Josh lying on the ground, bruised and bloody. His friends try to comfort him, but Josh just tells them to go to the school and pretend like nothing happened, as Josh was going to have to go home early to avoid being seen by Mr. Porter or any teachers who might ask questions. Before Josh can go home though, he has to go back to the school to get a spare lens out of his locker for his glasses that Mike broke during their fight. At his locker, Tessa, the last person Josh wants to see him like this, begins talking to him. Even though he's wearing a hoodie to cover his injuries, Tessa eventually notices Josh's black eye and swollen lip and asks him what happened. But because Josh needs to leave the school before someone else notices him, he makes her promise she won't tell anyone before he leaves her standing there, feeling awful that the girl he has a major crush on now wants nothing to do with him. In Chapter 7, still bloodied and bruised, Josh walks all the way to his apartment before deciding that he doesn't want to go inside just yet, and sits down against the trunk of a tree in a nearby park. After sitting there listening to music and thinking about how badly he messed up, a blast of static suddenly interrupts his music, and then a warning message begins to play. The message says that an airborne projectile is going to hit Josh's school and that everyone needs to evacuate the area. When the message stops playing, Josh looks into the clear blue sky, and sure enough, he sees what appears to be a meteor flying towards his school. Without hesitation, he takes off running to the school, desperate to warn everyone inside of the impending danger. After a very difficult run, Josh storms into the school and makes his way into the principal's office. While Josh attempts to catch his breath, Mr. Porter begins telling him how he knows all about the fight Josh got into with Mike at lunch. Josh interrupts Mr. Porter when he recovers enough to tell him about the meteor. Mr. Porter doesn't believe Josh at first, so Josh opens the window blinds in his office, where the two are able to clearly see the meteor getting closer and closer to the school. At first, Mr. Porter is devastated, blaming himself for telling everyone to ignore the same warning message that Josh had received earlier, therefore being the reason why everyone is still inside the school. Josh finds himself comforting the older man and telling him that there's still time to get everyone out of the building. So, Josh, Mr. Porter, and the school secretary spring into action. While the secretary calls school bus drivers to come pick everyone up, Mr. Porter begins shouting into his megaphone that everyone has to evacuate the school immediately. And Josh runs from classroom to classroom, making sure that everyone is leaving. It seems that Josh won't be able to reach every classroom in time before the meteor hits, but luckily he runs into 3 of his friends, who join him in evacuating the school. As Josh is finishing yelling at a classroom full of students on the 3rd floor to leave the building, he realizes that there's a high chance that Tessa might still be inside the computer room. Even though Josh knows he hardly has any time before the meteor hits, he takes off sprinting for the computer room, desperate to save Tessa. He barely has time to open the door to the room before he hears the screams of hundreds of people outside of the school. Realizing that he only has seconds before the meteor hits, Josh pushes the confused Tessa into the hallway, just before the meteor crashes through the roof of the computer room and right on top of Josh. In Chapter 8, Tessa regains consciousness after having been knocked out when the meteor hit the school. She looks around at the destroyed building before getting distracted by a glowing yellow light coming out of a massive hole in the damaged floor. When Tessa peers over the edge of the hole to see what's causing this light, she gets bathed in the light's rays, which wash over her and begin to make her feel stronger and more powerful than ever before. Eventually, the light grows dimmer and dimmer until it's completely gone, revealing its source, the meteor that had hit the school and was now lying on top of an unmoving Josh. As Tessa thinks about her likely dead friend, she gets angrier and angrier until a burning pain fills her body that is so overwhelming, she eventually loses consciousness once again. Right when this is happening, Josh regains consciousness underneath the meteor, but its glowing yellow light is so bright it temporarily blinds him. When the light dims, Josh discovers that instead of being severely injured from the meteor hitting him, he actually feels strong, stronger than he's ever felt before. And even though it seems crazy, Josh attempts to lift the giant meteor that lies on top of him. Although he struggles, Josh slowly manages to lift the meteor off him, move into a kneeling position, before eventually throwing the giant space rock out of the school the same way it came in. Exhausted after exerting himself so much, Josh takes note of the destroyed, burning remnants of the school around him, before looking down in shock at himself. The majority of his clothes had burned away from the heat of the meteor, revealing that Josh now looked incredibly strong and muscular. However, before Josh can really think about this transformation, he remembers that Tessa is still inside the school. After making his way up a pile of debris to get to the third floor, Josh finds Tessa lying on the floor unconscious. Although she seems to be uninjured, Tessa has also somehow undergone a major physical transformation, now looking far leaner and more muscular than she had mere minutes earlier. With the school falling apart all around them, Josh picks Tessa up and begins carrying her through the building, searching for a safe way out. In order to avoid hallways full of burning debris, Josh has to literally run through the walls of nearby classrooms, which he does with ease. Eventually, Josh is able to get himself and Tessa to the second floor, where he breaks through a brick wall, finally allowing for a way out of the burning building. With Tessa still unconscious in his arms, Josh walks over to the school parking lot where all the students and teachers are grouped together, watching the school go up in flames. Josh gently lays Tessa down on the grass so the school nurse can check her over. He then quickly checks in with Mr. Porter and a group of teachers who are trying to figure out if everyone had made it out of the school unharmed, before being met by 3 of his friends. The 3 of them question Josh for a few minutes about why he suddenly looks so different, but one of his friends is more concerned about the fact that the 4th friend, Chris, was in the school's biology lab last period, and no one from that class has been seen. Josh lends his cell phone to his concerned friend to use to try and get a hold of Chris, and then leaves his friends to check in with the group of teachers once again. When he walks over, the visually upset and grief-stricken group of teachers eventually tell Josh that the biology lab is still trapped inside the burning building. At this same time, Josh's friend who had borrowed his cell phone comes running over to the group to inform them that he just got off the phone with their friend Chris, who told him that his class can't get out of the biology lab because something was blocking the door. As the teachers begin panicking and calling the strangely absent emergency services once again, Josh and his friend rush over to where their other 2 friends were standing beside Tessa. Josh tells the 3 of them that he was going to go back into the school to try and save the trapped biology class, since he had been able to withstand the fire and smoke earlier. Although his friends don't entirely believe that his sudden physical transformation had somehow granted Josh superpowers, they do understand that Josh was likely going to do this no matter what they say, so they do their best to encourage him. However, at that moment, Tessa wakes up and begs Josh not to go back into the burning school. Josh tries to reassure her, and then sprints away from the group and back towards the burning school. Although he hears some protesting from teachers and students behind him, Josh doesn't slow down until he enters the burning building the same way he and Tessa had escaped. Josh stumbles around the burning school half blindly for a few minutes until he eventually hears the faint yelling of voices nearby. He hurries towards them and finds a set of double doors that are being blocked by a large wooden support beam that was almost fully inflamed. After some struggle, Josh painfully grabs the burning beam and lifts it away from the doors. He then kicks in the doors and steps inside the room to find a group of terrified but thankfully unharmed students, including Chris and their teacher. The teacher leads the group through the burning school, with Josh following the group closely behind. The group nearly makes it through the school without any trouble until a giant roof beam consumed in flames begins falling right towards the middle of the group. Josh lunges forward and gets under the beam before it crushes anyone, holding it above his head. As his arms tremble under the weight, he yells for everyone to move past him and continue following the teacher out of the school. Although everyone is stunned as they watch Josh somehow hold the weight of this massive wooden beam, All the students eventually make their way past Josh and follow their teacher out of sight. Josh then drops the beam onto the collapsing floor, forcing him to find a different way out of the school. Josh backtracks to where the meteor first crashed into the school, and as he gets close, he spots an unconscious figure lying on the floor of the classroom across from the computer room. He goes over to the figure and sees that it's Mike. Josh pushes down his hatred for his bully and picks the boy up. With Mike draped over his shoulder, Josh enters the almost entirely destroyed computer room. Knowing that his only chance of getting out of the school is to jump through the hole in the wall where the meteor first hit the building, Josh sprints across the collapsing floor and jumps through the opening, soaring through the open air for a few seconds before falling towards the ground. After positioning Mike so Josh would take most of the impact, the two hit the ground hard, but Josh is unharmed, and it seems that Mike is too. Josh carries Mike back to the parking lot, but when they get closer, Josh is shocked to see a group of soldiers carrying futuristic rifles are forcing everyone, including the soot-covered biology class, onto the buses, leaving only a small group of students. When the soldiers see Josh, they surround him with their rifles aimed at his chest. Josh doesn't know what to do, so he just does as they say and lays down Mike in the grass beside him before putting up his hands. After two soldiers haul Mike away on a gurney, Josh sees Tessa nearby, still looking weak, being led towards some sort of prisoner transport bus by a few of the soldiers. Although outraged by this, Josh can't move towards Tessa without being shot by the soldiers. With tensions high, the sound of rusty brakes causes everyone to jump. A school bus pulls into the parking lot and the terrified driver is immediately greeted by two soldiers pointing their guns at him. The driver exits the bus as fast as he can, forgetting to put it in park. The bus starts rolling towards the small group of students and quickly picks up speed. Although the soldiers manage to warn most of the students to get out of the way, one girl trips and seems to be too stunned to get out of the path of the bus. A soldier heroically reaches her and covers her body with his own to absorb the impact of the bus. But Josh can't just stand there and watch this happen. He sprints over to the bus, and right before it hits the two of them, Josh holds out his arms and the bus slams into him. The front of the bus crumbles as if it just hit a concrete barrier, and although it pushes him back a few feet, Josh is able to stop the bus before it hits the soldier. Josh then helps the stunned soldier and girl to their feet, and the crowd of students cheer. But just as everyone barely has time to let out a sigh of relief, a blood-curdling scream comes from somewhere nearby. Tessa, who had been tackled by one of the soldiers to get her out of the way of the bus, violently throws the man off her with an impossible amount of strength. Josh slowly walks over to her, trying to calm her down, but when Tessa turns around, Josh sees that her eyes are glowing with yellow energy. In Chapter 9, the final chapter of Part 1, Josh tries his best to talk to Tessa in a soothing voice to calm her down. Although this seems to work at first, the soldiers standing behind Josh and pointing their rifles at Tessa eventually set her off once again, and she begins attacking them in a fit of superpowered rage. Seeing that she's just as strong as he is, Josh takes cover behind a nearby jeep next to the soldier he had just saved from being hit by the school bus. After getting some assurance from the soldier that the bullets the soldiers were firing at Tessa are electric and will only stun her, Josh decides to help the soldiers land a shot. Josh makes his way towards Tessa right as she finishes attacking the last of the soldiers shooting at her. Josh steps in front of Tessa and tries calming her down once again. But when that doesn't work and she tries attacking Josh, Josh grabs her, pinning her arms to her sides. This gives the soldier taking cover behind the jeep the chance he needs to land a shot, with the electric bullet he fires knocking Tessa out the second it hits her. After Josh carefully lays Tessa down on a nearby gurney, the soldier walks over to him and says that he and Tessa are going to have to go with them to be tested on. Josh is reluctant at first, as he thinks about leaving his mom and his friends behind, but he does agree to this. The soldier then suddenly shoots Josh in the back 3 times with his electric rifle, causing Josh to get knocked unconscious. When Josh wakes up sometime later, he's seated on the prisoner transport bus that had been parked in the school's parking lot. There's a cuff around his ankle, yet he's still able to move around the bus freely. So he makes his way to the front, stumbling a bit from the movement of the bus. The soldier sitting in the passenger seat notices Josh walking towards them, and he tells him to sit back down in the back across from Tessa. Josh does as he's told and sits back down, nervous about the fact that Tessa sits unconscious only a few meters away from him. Although the soldiers treat Josh fairly kindly for a prisoner, providing him with a change of clothes and a TV he can use to watch any show he wants, after a few hours of driving, Josh starts to get bored. He decides to play some music through the TV to pass the time, and even sings along for a few minutes, until the sound of Tessa's voice brings him back to reality. The now awake Tessa looks at Josh, her eyes fortunately no longer glowing yellow and her rage now gone. Josh sits next to her and the two talk about what had happened back at the school when Tessa attacked those soldiers. And she reveals that she couldn't control what she was doing. Feeling terrible about what she did, Tessa begins to cry, with Josh awkwardly comforting her. Once Josh and Tessa are both feeling a bit more calm, Josh lets Tessa pick a show to watch until the bus pulls off the highway onto a quiet dirt road, and eventually comes to a stop in front of a gate guarded by 2 more soldiers. As the guards speak to the soldier sitting in the passenger seat, one of the guards lets it slip that they plan to experiment on Josh and Tessa. As the bus drives through the open gate, Tessa begins panicking at the thought of getting experimented on. Josh tries to calm her down, but he can see that her eyes are beginning to turn yellow, and realizes that the only thing he can do to help her is to get her off this bus. So Tessa rips off their ankle restraints, and then Josh kicks open the door at the back of the bus. Alarms go off inside the bus as Josh and Tessa jump from the moving vehicle and land in front of 2 army jeeps that have been following them. Josh and Tessa take off running together, trying to get away from the soldiers who are quickly pursuing them on foot. Although Josh and Tessa are much faster than the soldiers, the two notice a giant metal fence that stands in front of them and realize that they are inside of a military base, so there is nowhere to run. As Josh suggests to the desperate Tessa that maybe they should just give these soldiers a chance, the two are suddenly illuminated by the bright headlights of nearby jeeps. A group of soldiers stand next to the jeeps with their rifles aiming at the 2 of them, but one man steps forward and orders the soldiers to lower their weapons. When the man gets closer, Josh recognizes him as the military man who had come to their school yesterday to talk to Mr. Porter. Tessa also seems to recognize him, but it isn't until he introduces himself to Josh as General Brian Walker that it's revealed that this man is Tessa's father. General Walker then welcomes Josh and Tessa to the NRC. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is part 1 of Strength. But obviously, this is not where this story ends, so it's time to talk about part 2. Now, like I said, when I started this motion comic series, I had every intention to continuously release 2 episodes a week until the very last chapter of Strength. However, unfortunately for me, the incredibly talented artist that had done all the illustrations for Strength made the decision that he wanted to focus on working on his own comic story. And of course, I wished him all the best with this. However, this put me in the difficult position where I no longer had an artist to work with to help me bring Strength to life in this way. I chatted to a few other local artists, viewed their portfolios, and even tried my hand at using AI-generated art for a while. However, I honestly wasn't very satisfied with any of their art and made the decision not to go forward with hiring another artist or using AI-generated art. But the good news is that I have 6 more episodes of Strength that I will begin releasing next week. These episodes will cover chapters 10 to 15 of my novel and will end up finishing in almost the middle of my story. After that, I will no longer be releasing episodes of Strength in this format. But don't worry, I would never leave you guys on a cliffhanger, and I encourage you to finish this story by reading my paperback novel, which again is available on Amazon or on strengthbook.ca. Now, for those of you who tuned in to watch an episode, episodes, or even every single episode of the Strength motion comic series, I really want to say thank you. I've gotten so much positive feedback from people who watch the motion comic series, and it's a big part of the reason why I wanted to make this video, and also why I wanted to work so hard in making 6 more episodes of the motion comic series for you guys to enjoy. So please stay tuned, because starting next week, I am going to begin releasing the last 6 episodes of the Strength motion comic series. And thank you guys so much once again for watching this video and for watching other videos of the Strength motion comic series. I'll see you soon.